Paul, how important is it that parents actually don't criticise their children?
Well, again, we go back to the two types of criticism, really. The point about it is, of course, parents have to correct their children, you know. If a child runs out into the middle of the road and the parent has to kind of help it learn, you don't do that because you can get injured. So correction is a very, very important part of parenting. You're teaching your children social rules and all that. The problem isn't so much that. The problem comes more with the emotion that goes with the criticism. If the parent is just frustrated and puts the child down and focuses on the child rather than their behavior, you're stupid, you're useless, you're inadequate, you're blah, 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 blah. All of that. And also doesn't give the child any opportunity for reconciliation. Because we all have blow-ups with our kids. But the key thing is how quickly can you reconcile with them. So they know, okay, we've had a blow-up, but mum loves me or dad loves me really. That's important. So correction is very important. The emotions in which they're delivered is very important. If the child has got told off, the ability for that child to feel reconciled, so they don't just have to come back, be submissive and, before the parent will accept them. So the ability to feel reintegrated quickly is extremely important as well, and also that the child shouldn't overly fear the parent. Okay, respect is important, of course, but if you're very frightened of your parent, then it makes it difficult for you to use your parent as a object of affection, because otherwise you've got two models of your parent. On the one hand, they can be very terrifying to you. On the other hand, they can be affectionate to you. This can cause problems for the child. So correcting your child, very important. Inspiring them, very important. Encouraging them, very important. Telling them to do their homework, very important. But it's done in the context of caring for the child, being compassionate to the child, setting boundaries for the child, not out of anger, frustration, or labeling the child, or because you hate them in that moment, and also giving opportunities for reconciliation and getting back onto good feelings again.
Do you find that when people actually reduce the amount they criticise themselves, that they reduce the amount they criticise other people?
We suspect so. We don't have any direct evidence for that, but there are certainly that people who are more self-compassionate or less frightened of self-compassion, because some people are very frightened of being compassionate. They think if they're compassionate, they will become weak, their standards will drop. If they're compassionate to other people will take advantage and just use them, and so on. So, so people who are frightened of compassion tend to be more critical of others, but people who are generally kind with themselves tend to be more empathic. They're more validating and empathic of other people. So self-criticism tends to go with more negative views of others too.
So kind of the old model that we actually need to be kinder to other people first, and then we'll feel better ourselves, is actually faulty. What we actually need to do is to be kinder to ourselves and then kinder to other people.
Well, ideally both at the same time. I mean, the interesting question, the interesting point about that, of course, that model of being kind to others first and then kind to yourself came from religious approaches, and also in Buddhism it was the same. But when the Dalai Lama came over to the West, he could not believe the level of self-criticism, self-hatred in the West. So you just don't see it in Tibet, people don't have that. So the idea was that, he was saying that people just have an intrinsic sense of themselves, so you don't have to do that much work on it, but you develop it to spread it outside, compassion for others. But in the West, we have serious problems with ourselves. We can be very narcissistic. We think we're entitled to all kinds of stuff. That's not self-compassion. That's just arrogance. Arrogance is arrogance. It's entitlement. It's what we call narcissism. So self-compassion. We do have a problem with it in the West, and there are increasing number of people like Christian Neff in Texas and Chris Germer in Boston, who are doing quite a lot of work now on this issue of self-compassion, and it's become quite an important focus now in psychotherapy.
Can you say a little bit about the difference of approach in terms of building up our self-compassion as to building up self-esteem? You hear a lot about, oh, I need more self-esteem, or I need to go on that self-esteem workshop, that kind of thing.
Well, we tend to see self-esteem as more related to the achievement, doing system, that dopamine system I talked about. It's fine, it's good, I'm not knocking it. The only problem is that sometimes it can be a little fragile. And so that if you're doing well, you feel good, but if you don't do very well, you don't feel quite so good. There's also a tendency for high self-esteem, to be associated with increased risk of arrogance and even aggression. Whereas self-compassion is a different kind of thing altogether. Whereas self-esteem, the good part of self-esteem is really self-confidence, actually. But self-compassion increases, I should say, when things are going badly. Self-esteem increases when things are going well. Self-esteem increases when you're feeling you're doing a little better than other people. Self-compassion increases when you realize your connectedness and your similarity to other people. So there are a number of differences between self-compassion and self-esteem. Self-compassion is a slowing process. You slow the breath, you slow down, you focus on a certain kind of emotion. Whereas self-esteem, the emotions are much more energized and optimistic and upbeat. But it's not to trade one off against another. It's really that you need a balance. You need to balance these experiences of the self, because there are these two different emotion systems: one a quieting, peaceful, well-being system, contentment, centeredness, and the other engagement in the world, active, achieving and doing.
Can you say a little bit more about the importance of feeling that we're sort of connected, or the commonality as you talk about it?
Yeah, the connectedness, I think, is very important, and it comes from this understanding that life is very difficult. In fact, up until quite recently, nearly all of the religions believed that this life was a life of suffering, and the next life was the good one. The next one was the holiday, the good hotels and the sun. But this one was suffering, and it was the way in which you suffer which would determine whether you got there or you didn't. Recently, we've kind of forgotten this, actually, because we think medicine can solve so many problems, and we've got all our channels to take TV channels to take our mind off things. But where we are all one is that we all suffer. We all live, we all die. And so suffering is right the way through. All of us have to come to terms with this. And when you wake up to the fact that this is what life is, it's living, growing, decaying and dying, what the Buddha called dukkha, the only solution to it is to reach out to each other on this journey and to try to help each other, because it's painful. It's a painful journey.
And it sounds like we're all in the same boat.
We're all in the same boat. No one escapes it. No one escapes it. And what you want to try to do in your life, if possible, if you can't be compassionate, then at least don't add to people's suffering. Okay, and that again is a view that many religions have, because life is tough, it's difficult. So this connectedness is the connectedness through we're all part of the life flow, we're all part of the flow of life, kind of part of this planetary life system, and that's what we are.
This question might sound a bit of an odd question, but what would you say to somebody who's like, oh, right, now I've got to go and be really, really compassionate to myself, and then they find that they're starting to fail?
It's a good question. That self-critical part just won't let go, will it? Okay, so we won't judge you on the text then, Alistair, but we'll judge you on how compassionate you are. So we're still going to judge you.
Right.
Okay, so the critic's always bouncing around, and you just look out for it. The point about self-compassion is that you do it not... Well, yes, you do it playfully, seriously but playfully. You have a gentleness about it. And when you notice that you are thinking you're not doing it very well, that's great. It's opportunity for more practice.
So, Paul, do you think the world is becoming more or less compassionate?
Well, I think on the whole, we're gradually becoming more compassionate. Some people would see it as a spiritual awakening. And when you see the atrocities going on in the world today, you have to wonder. But if you go back 2,000 years, okay, people would have been flocking to the Roman games to see people torn to pieces and so forth. We don't do that now, and we know there's something intrinsically wrong about that. We have the Geneva Convention for war. 400 or 500 years ago, war was just a free-for-all. But at the same time, we're trying to understand that we can produce a moral approach to these things. We have the war trials going on now in The Hague and so on. So that's one aspect that I think if you look over, say, 2,000 or 3,000 years, there's definitely been a change towards a more compassionate society, with obviously notable exceptions, Second World War, Nazism and so on being one, of course. But generally I think there is a movement there. The other thing that's very interesting is that, particularly as with the internet and as people becoming more and more interactive with each other, that in itself is what we regard as a compassionate phenomena, the way in which people can communicate together. And we are actually living much more in the global village. And gradually, people are demanding better rights for women, better rights for children. And so the urge to move towards a compassionate society is there, and it's becoming more grassroots, I think. Of course, there are always forces on the other side that push and pull away from it, but in general, compassion is becoming much more of a focus, and certainly within science, the study of affiliative relationships, of the importance of early love in childhood, the importance of relationships with each other, excuse me, all of those things really bode well for the future. But there's phenomenal work to do.
Paul, I just want to thank you for your time today, for coming in and talking to us, and giving us so much interesting and insightful information. Thank you very much for your time.
Alistair, my pleasure. Thank you.